Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Rowing Chat episode. I'm Rebecca Caro, and I started the Rowing Chat podcast in 2013, and it's a podcast designed to be an interview, look into how other people in the sport do what they do, how they got to where they are, and to give you an insight into possibly things that you might try doing in your own club or your own crew. We wouldn't be able to keep the Rowing Chat podcast network going without our wonderful sponsors. And this month, October, we're sponsored by the Faster Masters Rowing Programme. They've just launched something called the Faster 5. This is a 5-article series comprising the core rowing philosophy and principles behind Faster Masters Rowing by Marlene Royal and myself, Rebecca Caro. The full Faster Masters 5 are blade work, technique, stroke power, racing, and fitness assessment. After you've got the Faster 5, you will know and understand what you need to address in order to improve your own rowing and sculling. By using the Faster 5, you will become confident in your own rowing practice, and you can buy the Faster 5 today as a standalone product. It's $147. Or you can get it free with any subscription program or subscription training program. These start at $15 a month. Become the rower you want to row with and find out more at fastermastersrowing.com/join. Our second sponsor is Kanghua UK. The team at Kanghua has got a single scull available for sale. It's an all-carbon spirit design for athletes weighing 60 to 65 kilograms. The boat's white, it has a stern-mounted aluminium wing rigger, and it's priced at £6,162, including VAT. You can trial a spirit single anywhere near your own home club by contacting Eric Sims. His email is uksales@kanghua.co.uk, which is spelled KANGHUA. You can find details of all our sponsors at rowing.chat/sponsor. We do welcome new people to podcast on the Rowing Chat Network. So if you're a podcaster or you'd like to give it a go, we would love for you to get in touch with us. And you can find our contact details at the website rowing.chat. Or you can also subscribe or use any of the traditional podcast listening apps. Now, today I'm delighted to be joined by Renae Domaschenz. Renae, welcome to your first Rowing Chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I can't believe we've known each other for a very long time, but I can't believe I've never asked you before, so bad on me. So Renae is a coxswain and a coach, and we met when she coxed my master's crew in Cambridge in the UK. And Renae, tell the listeners just a bit about yourself and your personal background in the sport of rowing.
Yeah, so I'm Australian, and I moved to the UK to do my PhD, and I moved into a house share with 3 guys, not a bad thing. And they were all boat club captains were involved in rowing. I didn't know anyone in Cambridge. And so they said, it's quite small. And as we all know, coxswains are pretty hard to come by. So they said, why don't you come down, and try the sport of rowing and this coxing deal. And so I went down to the boat shed and I jumped in a boat. And as Rebecca would know, it's a pretty wiggly course there in Cambridge. And they said, if she can take this grassy corner, which is this really tight corner, very narrow that goes around the corner, she could be suited for this job. And so I nailed it on the first turn. I wasn't quite sure which tight corner they were talking about. And then I kind of got hooked from there. Really, it's pretty exciting being able to drive something fast along the river. So that's kind of how I got into rowing for my college. And then in my very next year, from there, I can't remember how I met someone at one of the town clubs at City of Cambridge Town Club, but I think within my first 4 months of coxing, I was at Henley in my first boat. And I think that's where, as we all been to Henley and how prestigious and how exciting it is, really got me pretty excited about coxing. And so from there, my next year, I was coxing for the Cambridge Women's Boat Club for the lightweights and then the heavyweights. So pretty quickly up the pathway there. And then when I graduated from Cambridge, I did some coaching. I also moved down to London. So then I ended up coxing for Molesey Boat Club during kind of their elite times. I did some work with the GB trialling squads. However, I didn't hold my GB passport at the time to go any further. So I did a lot of things in GB. And Rebecca, I'm not sure how I got into your master's crew, actually.
I know exactly how. So it was Sue Brown. Sue decided it would be nice to have a master's crew in Cambridge. But the problem with the women of our age is that we were all at different clubs. So it was like one at one club and two at another. And rather than try and persuade everyone to leave their club and join a single club, she formed her own club. And we were invited to do the town bumps as a sort of Cambridge masters, because wasn't there an express men's masters?
Yeah, that's right. There was an express men's masters. That's right.
And they said we'd like a ladies section.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then Sue thought up a very humorous name for us.
The Cambridge Old Women, also known as the Cows.
Yeah. That's right. So we were called the Cows for a very long time. And very long
time. You still have your Zooty? You still have your cow Zooty?
I have my cows all in one because I'm speaking English, or row suit if I'm
all in one, row suit.
Why are they called Zooties?
Yeah, I'm not sure why Australians call them Zooties. I'm used to the English style of an all-in-one.
But it's zoot suit. Is that what Zooty is?
I think zoot suit or Zooty. Yeah. Interesting.
And Americans call them trow, Trou. And I thought that was short for trousers, but Americans don't talk about trousers. So
no,
is that just
I think my term in the US was just called a lycra.
So, your lycra? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, just put on your lycra. Yeah. That's weird to me, being an ex-dancer, putting on your lycra. It's like putting on your leotard, but you don't row in leotards, obviously.
I've seen people fancy dress, but never in leotards, maybe.
Yeah. Something for our next Cows reunion, perhaps.
That would be a ton of fun. So Renee's done a lot of coxing, and you're still coxing now, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah, still coxing now. So when I left the UK, I was probably in the UK for about 11 years. And then I returned to Australia just because the economy in the UK was getting a little bit poor. Sorry for those British that are online. I returned to Australia, and I thought I'd kind of done as much as possible. So, I did the Cambridge boat race. I did the Europeans, British championships, all the UK regattas that you could think of. I didn't have my British passport to cox for GB. So I came back to Australia thinking kind of a bit of new life, new sport. But the first person I met was actually a rower. And when they find out, that you're a coxswain and they Google you, they're like, you must come down to the shed. So I, quite quickly got involved again here in Canberra in Australia. And then people start to talk about you and what you've done. And then I decided, well, maybe it is a chance to, try and make an Australian team, even though I was in my 30s when I came back to Australia. There is no age limit. We can talk about that later on coxing. And I wasn't sure I wanted to go back into it. But, if you have the passion for it, as soon as you get back in that coxer seat, it can get quite exciting. Also kind of spurred on by, a friend of mine in the UK who Rebecca had met a few times, Crunch Lumble, who coached our winning Henley crew over in the UK. And he kind of always told me that I could make that Australian team. I just had to go for it. And so I guess when he passed away, unfortunately, about five years ago now, I guess that's always still on my mind that, one of the coaches that I really admired had this hope in me that I could make this Australian team. And since he's gone, I guess I've really tried to, try and go for that goal, and been fortunate enough to be selected for Australia for the last 3 years in the PR3 para rowing mixed 4. And also, lucky enough last year to qualify that boat for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, or 21 we're now calling it. So, yeah, I have been back in coxing to a high level.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, when a coach or a mentor or someone you admire kind of opens up a window of potential and sees something in you and says, you know, you could do this, it's fantastically motivating. And obviously for you, you feel it would be honoring his memory as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, it's a bit of a shame that I was pretty close the year that he passed away. So, he may never know that I've actually made the team, but his family do. And I'm sure, he does as well. So, but a lot of hard work. I knew it would be a lot of hard work when you come back to a country, in Australia. I was not known on the Australian scene. I didn't grow up coxing in Australia or the Australian system. So coming from overseas, it takes a while to network around and make yourself known. So there's a lot of sacrifices there, but I also sacrificed a lot back in the UK. As we'll talk about kind of coxing, how did I get into coxing? How do I get better at coxing? I basically said yes to everyone. I really got out there and exposed myself to the masters cruise, to town cruise, to college cruise, to learn as much as I can, at the same time as doing my PhD. So, I didn't sacrifice the college bar as much as perhaps we should have, but I certainly sacrificed many things to row as much as possible.
It's very interesting you saying get better by saying yes to everything, because I had a similar experience. A friend was asked to do a fun race with Steve Redgrave's wife, Anne Redgrave, and it was a mixed coxed four at this little regatta not far from Marlow. And believe it or not, our coxswain was George Harrison's son. And I was like, I'm this close to the Beatles. And Danny Harrison coxed us. I was like, oh, whoa, that was quite something. And if I hadn't have said yes, I would never have met him.
Yeah, absolutely. Just getting exposed to even the coaches of those crews. And I can also row scull and row both sides because I guess I'm a scientist full time, and so pretty curious. And so when I started to watch the rowers and try and make them row better, then I want to know what it feels like. If I'm telling them how to do something or instructing them in something, and when they have kind of trust that I know what it feels like and how to do it, I think that makes you a better coxswain. So I've certainly spent a few regattas coxing and rowing at the same, well, not at the same time, but certainly on the same day.
Tell me a little bit about how you networked in the Australian system to get better known. What did you actually do?
It's all about getting exposure, to the rowers that might be heading to the national team. So when I returned to Australia, they didn't yet have their centralised system. So the rowers that were nominating or going for the national team were spread out around Australia. So in Canberra, we're quite a small territory within New South Wales. Not too many rowers nominating for the national team, which means I don't get exposure to those rowers. When I say exposure, I mean able to cox them. So that takes a bit of time. So applying for the camps that Australia had at the time, and then getting in on my CV. So I feel I have a pretty strong coxing CV over in Europe. So coming to do that, and then getting myself involved in my state. So not just with my club, which is the Australian National University. There's a lot of events we can do, but also getting into my state team. So then when we go to nationals, the states compete against each other. And so, you're just moving up that pathway of being seen on the state team and those kind of things. And then, contacting coaches that might have those women or men in their clubs. I'd like to come out, meet you guys. This is my background. Can I come out in the tinny and meet you guys? That kind of thing. And then if there's an opportunity for me to cox a boat or a training session, I'd love to do that. So, just putting in the groundwork, I suppose, of getting exposed to the coxing of these rowers, because if they've never heard of you or never had the pleasure of me driving them down the lake, then they don't know how good you might be.
And I'm hearing that the rowers are an important part of a coxswain's pathway into a national crew. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think it's just a national crew. I think it's any crew. I think, talking about what the rowers like to hear, or the relationships you can have with them, or the trust they have in their coxswain while racing. I mean, ultimately, our coach is not in the boat with us, right, when we're racing. So that person that has to motivate you and inspire you and implement the plan is your coxswain. So the relationship you can have with them and the trust you can have in them, I think is important at the end of the day. So, yeah, not just the national team, it could be your club crews. Certainly when I was in the UK, down at Molesey Boat Club, there's a few coxes there, and it's about getting in the crew and exposing yourself. And this can be difficult for coxes because often, you might not make the crew that you're after, and, have to have a tough mind. And, it might not be that you're not good enough. It's just a bit of timing and whether you're suited to that crew at that time.
You've raised some really interesting points here. So you talked about what does the crew like to hear? So imagine you're in your first or second outing with a new crew. How do you go about working that out?
I certainly wouldn't go into a crew and start dominating and being really bossy. I really kind of get in. I speak to the coach before we get in the water and what we're after. And I kind of probably speak a little bit less as I'm implementing exercises and things like that. And then I would draw on my knowledge and, make a few corrections or a few calls on a few of the basic corrections like that moving through. And I certainly wouldn't go in and, be pretty bossy. I mean, I believe that a coxswain has to grow as rowers do. And so you have to adapt to the crew that you're with. So I don't cox every crew exactly the same because not every rower is the same in every boat. So it's really about learning, and you can learn a fair bit just when you're out rowing with them in your first or second session, how it feels. So I'd probably pick up on some of the technical points first when we're going along. Obviously, I don't know their personality, so I'm not going to start naming them through the crew to make personal improvements because you can understand, someone sitting. I'm sure if I was sitting there rowing myself and I'd never met the coxswain and they're like, "Oh, Renae, do this," I might put me offside straight away, going, "Well, wait a minute, you haven't seen me do something, or you don't know me." So it's very much about patience and, putting your basic ground knowledge into your session and working with the coach and even the stroke man or woman in front of you, and just being patient until you can grow those relationships with people.
And you presumably debrief as well after each outing and say, what went well? What did I say that worked or didn't work?
Yeah, absolutely. We might debrief about a session if we're doing a piece, for example. Some crews will be happy to give you feedback without asking. Those are the great crews that it's kind of like a family and they're like, "This was great. It was great to have you on board. We really liked this. Have a think about, trying that," which gives you a bit more confidence. Or sometimes you might get out and the crew will debrief and they'll mention nothing about coxing. I'm sure we've all been in situations. I've been in crews where you would jump in a crew and the coach doesn't really want you to say anything. They just want you to steer them down the course or down the lake. And for me, that's not why I go coxing. To sit in the boat and to say nothing and kind of just steer down the courses. There's more to coxing than just that. So, I don't find that as enjoyable. We like to be part of a team or a crew or a squad or a club, in fact, that the coxswain is part of the crew, which I strongly believe, there's 9 people in that boat.
So you say there's more to coxing than steering. What is the entirety of the potential that a cox can bring to their crew?
Well, there's so many things, and I think if you ask different people, they will tell you so many different things. So number one is steering. You want to go from A to B as fast as possible, and to do that, you want to steer a straight line, or if you're on a wiggly course, the best line. Ideally, you have a rudder, but ideally you don't want to use that as much as you can because that upsets the speed of the boat. So steering is your number one priority. If you're in novice crews or school clubs, safety is a number 2, I think, amongst coxswains, because the rowers obviously are facing backwards, so they can't see where they're going. So obviously your job as the coxswain, the eyes of the boat, is to make sure that your crew is training safely. And then, what else makes a good coxswain? Motivation for your crew. Technical knowledge is also really important. Relationships with your crew and coach to be able to work as a team is really important as well.
So where did you go to get the technical knowledge, particularly? Because obviously nowadays you can go onto the internet, but I'm guessing there wasn't a ton of that when you were first starting your coxing career.
Well, I mean, the internet was definitely, I don't know how old you think I am, but the internet was definitely working when I was coxing. So I probably could look some things up.
But there wasn't so much stuff there. I mean, now there is
absolutely.
so much. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think saying yes to everyone really got me exposed to different ways of teaching and learning. The same as if you were a teacher, for example, children or students learn in different ways. They could be visual, they could be verbal. And so I guess really getting out and exposing myself to different crews and different coaches expanded my vocabulary and technical knowledge. And then getting myself involved in all of the sessions. Certainly in the UK, coxing is very involved. There's a lot of 8s and 4s coxing in the UK compared to Australia. In the UK, I would be running the erg sessions with the team, and I would go around with the coach and hear them give technical feedback on the ergs. In the weight session, you'd be running the circuits in the weight session with the coach. And again, you'd walk around, why do we do this exercise? Why are these deadlifts helping us in the boat? Same as on the erg. What kind of exercises on the erg could we correct this with? So really being proactive, if you like, and learning more about the stroke yourself. And then, watching the videos that you can see online as well from rowing is really helpful. The good and the bad, of course.
You learn as much from the bad as the good, don't you?
Yeah, I think you learn more from the bad than the good, actually.
Now, imagine you're sitting in the back of an 8. What can a coxswain actually see from the cox's seat? Not a front loader, stern loader.
Well, I can tell you, if you have a guy that's 6'5" in the stroke seat in front of you, you can't see very much. You certainly can't see the other 7 rowers behind him. So you can see the oars, the sticks sticking out the sides, but you can, there's quite a huge blind spot there. But look, when you're sitting in an 8, it's not so much what you can see as what you can feel. I believe the best coxswains are the ones that can feel corrections that need to be made in the boat, or in fact calls that make the boat feel better. So sitting in the stern of an 8, the first thing that you can see that the coach can't see unless they were sitting right behind you in the tinny is the blade heights, off the water, and handle heights. So the most efficient is that they're in unison and at the same height. So you can see hand heights for sure. You can see the blade depth of the water, of the blades in the water, which is, again, around blade depth. So in regards to the oars, you can see all of the oars. You might not see the hands on the rowers behind your stroke man, but you can certainly see by the angle of the blades where the hands are being held. In regards to steering, yep.
Keep going.
In regards to steering, if you do have a big fella or a lady, you might be quite a tall lady in front of you, you do have a blind spot. So now and then you need to take a little peek around to ensure that you don't hit anything. And I'm sure there's a few stories or a few videos where we've seen, certainly on the River Thames, in the head of the river, the big black buoy, I think it was. It used to be a big black buoy, didn't it? Towards
they painted it yellow, but they still
painted it yellow. Yeah, the black buoy painted it yellow, perhaps so that you can see it. But there's certainly, a few crews. And, it's difficult because if you're coxing well and you're really in the zone, you're on the job and your adrenaline's running and you're focusing on the race, you are looking out, for things in your vision, but sometimes, you might slip that. So we've seen some videos, certainly, where some crews have hit that black buoy down the River Thames. And, those are not the only things, that you need to look out for. I remember doing the GBR regatta in the UK. I'm not sure if that's still running, but it's a long weekend, and it's like Gloucester, the Bristol Docks, and then Ross on Wye in Wales. And I did that one in a coxed force. I was in a bow loader, which you can obviously see everything in front of you. You can't see the rowers behind you. It's a lot of feel, but you can see everything in front of you. And I remember going to the Bristol Docklands, coxing, and in the Docklands there. And I remember coxing the race, and then it got really dark, and realised that this big ship was coming past us, which I obviously couldn't see because I was facing the other direction. And my rowers didn't tell me that this big ship was coming past. And so I said to them, they said to me, well, your job as coxing is to see where we're going. And I said, yeah, absolutely. But if there's something that you can see coming that I can't see, you might want to give me a heads up on that one. And then we went out to Ross on Wye, which is a lovely side-by-side, what I would say is a little race in a stream. It's kind of like a creek side-by-side. And I remember getting in front in one of my races and coming around the corner, and there was a cow standing in my lane having a drink out of the water. And I was thinking to myself, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? So, I checked that the crew next to me was obviously, we had clear water so I could kind of steer around the cow. And then I just gave the men I was coxing a heads up. We're going to have to move into the other lane. There's a cow in the water. And they didn't move. They were a little bit annoyed that I might move. And I said, there's a cow in the lane. And the bow boy, the man in the bow seat, turned around. He's like, yep, she's right. There's a cow in the lane. So what can a coxswain see? Everything, usually what's in front of you, but certainly not what's behind you. So that can be fun.
I remember doing the fore's head. We're in a bow loader Cox 4, and we were marshalling, and I was the bowman, and the coxswain said to me, hey, Rebecca, if something's coming up behind us, because in those days they didn't start all of the categories together. It was all mixed up based on your finishing position of the year before. And we knew there was a men's quad starting immediately behind us. And so being a smart fellow, he said, he thought to himself, they're probably going to be faster than us. So he said, look, I'll try and start as far away from them as I can. But as they gain on us, can you tell me if they're going to pass us on bow side or stroke side, just so that I know? And I was like, yep, okay, no problem. And I said, don't worry, I've got my bow side and stroke side socks on, which I bought from Rock the Boat, and they had green and red. And I literally took my foot out of the shoe and waved it in the air and said, here, look. And he turned around and he went, you've got them on the wrong feet.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, what you can see. I remember doing fore's head also in a bow loader, and the weather was horrendous. White capped, lots of water, and obviously when you're in the bow seat, you're kind of level with the water. So I remember taking on quite a lot of water, and coxswains in the UK and perhaps Europe have to wear a life jacket. So I remember my life jacket kind of puffing up quite big, and it was raining hard, and I was basically filling up. The water was washing over my face, for the first few kilometers. And what can the cox see? Not very much at that point. Nor is it very pleasant, and nor am I having any fun anymore. So I remember, coxing one like that, which is pretty awful. I also remember being with Molesey Boat Club in a men's coxed 4 at Nationals up at Nottingham in an end packer. We borrowed the end packer on the day, so it was quite big. And therefore my coxer seat was quite big. I'm quite small, so I couldn't reach the bottom of the boat when I was laying in there. So I was just kind of holding onto the sides carefully. And, I was in elite men's crew. So these men, I think Mo Sabibi and James Fawad in the day, they were under 23. So before they made the men's 8. So we're talking about quality rowers here. So we went off at the start somewhere in the high 40s, and I immediately slipped into the bow seat right down the bottom. Couldn't see anything, obviously. And, there's such speed and such rate that it took me, a good 100 meters or so before I could pop my head back out. And lucky the guys are experienced, if the rudder's straight, you can steer it straight down the course. So I kind of popped out. Okay. Yep. And we're in the lead. Good job. And I do remember, I think James might have mentioned, they didn't notice at all because I just kept coxing, although I was slipped under the bow seat. So what can a cox see? Well, you see many things or not so much.
I'm going to say the inside of the bow canvas.
Yeah, inside of the bow canvas. Yeah. But obviously in the stern loader 8s or stern loader 4s, you can see some technique because you can see the oars and you can see your stroke man or woman or perhaps a few behind them. So in regards to some technical calls that you would make, you can see some of those things. In the bow loader, it's all about feel, and a coxswain that can feel what's going in the boat and correct those things, are really some of your best coxswains. You can't see the oars. You can certainly see if the bow woman or man gets a good catch because you get the splash in your face. But obviously it's all about feel. So I think it's really important if a coxswain wants to improve to get in a bow loader and feel the changes. And how do you feel those changes? Well, when you're a new coxswain, you listen to the coach. So you can obviously feel what's happening when you're running with the boat. And then a coach might make a correction from the tinny. And when he makes that correction, if that correction is made, I'll be able to feel what that change feels like in the boat. And then I can, put that together with the call he made so that when I feel the boat doing that again, if I make the same call, I'm able to make that change myself.
Do you often then repeat what the coach has said? So they make a change, you feel it, and they probably then drift off that. Do you then call it again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Some people say rowers have, the minds of goldfish is one thing I've heard, Sometimes you have to repeat a few things, corrections. Obviously, in one session, you can't correct everything. And the same for a coxswain. You don't want to say so many different things within a session because that can be quite overwhelming. So you might have 2 or 3 focus points throughout your session, and you might reiterate those words that the coach used, and then you would start to have different variations of the same call. For example, obviously from going from A to B down a 2K course, you want your rowers to be powerful on their legs the whole way down. But if I was to call legs over 2K course, I can tell you I wouldn't be the most popular coxswain for my crew. So technically, how do we get those legs on, or which part of the drive are we talking about? The front end, the acceleration through the second half of the seat speed. So really building my vocabulary that works with each individual crew. And it is different. Crews respond differently. But certainly you will hear novice school coxes often counting a lot is quite a popular thing, or legs, lots and legs. And I'm sure, Rebecca, as you would know, if you've been rowing a long race and you've been rowing 20 minutes and your coxswain's telling you more power on the legs, you're already at your maximum. So give me something else here.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly in my experience, when I've been coaching or sometimes doing calls from the bow seat with a less experienced crew, we usually only have one technical call and one power call. So there's actually only 2 things that the goldfish need to be able to remember. And so you kind of call the technical call, which might be, blades down to the water or catches or however you shorten it. And then you call the power call, and then you let them row for a bit, and then they go off the pattern, and then you go back and you do the actual same thing again, right? Blades down to the water, do that, 10 strokes, then call the power call again. And actually they get better and more skillful at doing it with fewer variations, I find. Yeah,
interesting. And obviously when we are calling a race, we always have a plan when we go into a race. My job as a coxswain is to be adaptable. It's my job to read the race or what's happening. So an example, just this weekend here with the Australian National University, we have an event called Disher Cup. It's the 50th anniversary. So we had the Governor General out watching the race on the weekend, and the Australian National University Men's 8 will race the Royal Military College and also the Australian Defence Force Academy. And it's based on some of the first rowers through the Defence Academy that rowed King's Cup back in the day.
Yeah, so 1918, wasn't it? 1919?
Yeah, that's right. Huh. And so on the weekend, it's a 3K race. It was meant to be flat, and I can tell you it certainly wasn't flat. So it was white water, pretty horrendous. I got pretty soaked from the stern loading 8 before we got to the start line. And, the plan changes. It's very unlikely in those conditions that we're going to be able to rate 36, 37 down the course. So, the rate goes out of the window, and it's about the quality of your rowing through that piece. Survival of the fittest, really, who can be the tidiest with their blades in those kind of water conditions to get to the finish. And so calling that race, it's probably not something that you record and send to someone, because it could be very boring, and it's really just about keeping the rowers in control and patient and making sure we can get through those conditions.
How can you tell if the rowers are in control?
Well, if they're not in control, you can see their blades going everywhere. You can feel the boat rocking around, and I guess I feel that I can feel things in the boat quite well. So they're really letting the conditions take them instead of taking hold of the conditions. So, in those kind of, a few calls of like, let's take on the conditions, sit up, let's be tidy here. Those kind of things to keep us nice and still. So you can just feel not just the nerves from racing, you can just feel the rower's frustration, if you like, trying to get through such conditions. But if you keep them calm, you cox calm, and you give them some technical points, tell them how to get through that water as a team, that's going to get you, the win. And we did win the race, so that's pretty exciting. And certainly when we got out in front, it was just fun, I think, for the guys to be able to get through those conditions.
Was it side by side then? 3?
Yeah, side by side. Yeah, so we're in the middle. We had 2 crews either side. The first bridge, everyone wants the same arch. Yeah, it's not unusual. It's a little bit like, head of the river, or, for example, head of the river, you usually go one off. You do go one after the other, and there's one stream that everyone wants to sit in. And I do remember being with the Molesey crew in the top 10 of the women's race, and having two crews that in front of us that had kind of come side by side. So they were slower. We were the fastest of the three, and I have the right to have the line. Not unusual that some coxes can just be not very good at giving away or a little bit cocky to themselves. But, I had the line, and I thought that I could just squeeze through these two crews quite comfortably. We might clash blades a little bit, but I'm certainly not going to pull myself out of the stream and disadvantage our crew. So you would obviously yell out politely in many different ways, as would my crew members, for them to let us through. It didn't look like they were going to move, and so I find that quite exciting. We hang on to our oars, and we're going through the middle. So those can be quite fun races as well. So on the weekend, I was the first one to the arch, so that was pretty good.
Oh, excellent. And of course, the crew, you're telling the crew what to expect. There's
Absolutely.
2 crews in front. We're going to go through the middle. I need you to do this, or...
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important as a coxswain to keep your crew informed. Obviously, they can't see where they're going. You can see what's happening in front of you. So just giving them short heads up of what is happening. We're coming up to a bridge, or there's a crew, because, if there's a crew quite close to you in front, then the water gets bumpy and they can feel that. And, I'm sure they just want to know what's going on. What is that? So you tell them what it is. The more information you give them, the more relaxed they are when they're rowing.
Now, we've got a question from a listener, and this is Simone Archer, who asks, do you ever drop out a rower or a pair of rowers if they are causing issues in a race so that they can reset?
No, I would never drop out rowers or a pair of rowers during a race. I would just cox them back into the rhythm to make sure that they can get back on the rhythm, and then they'll be more patient to get back on. But I'd never drop out rowers during a race, unless I was going to hit something, which unfortunately might be in the lake or the river. But no, I'd never drop out any rowers during a race. If they're not quite following the others, have to make some calls to get on the rhythm. So you might start with the timing at the catch and the finish, depending on the experience of the crew, perhaps. Just get their timing in first, and plenty of encouragement, because I'm sure they're feeling pretty poor about themselves that they can't quite get it together. So if you give them some encouragement, always positive in the crew to get them back on the rhythm, you'll get them back on. But I really try never to be negative at all in a crew. And that can be difficult and take some experience, but I certainly don't say to crews, don't do this or don't do that, or those kind of negative words. I have to think of a way to correct it up so that we can change that technique, and then immediately give positive feedback that the change has happened.
That's really important, because as a coach as well, I can definitely concur that saying don't square late is less good than saying turn your blade earlier or sooner, or when you go over your knees or when you go over your toes, so there's a visual reference.
Yeah, exactly. And then giving them the positive feedback that they've made the change. I know myself, if I'm rowing, I remember rowing in the 7-seater and the coxswain, calling a change, and the coach perhaps calling a change from stern pair. And so we're both there trying to make this change, but then we don't hear anything else. So, you can imagine yourself going, well, is that it? Is that right? Is that change? Does that look any different? Whereas where I'm coxing, I might be like, if we're talking about squaring the oars early into the catch, I'd be like, square over the shins on the way forward. And I'm like, yep, that's it. Great change. Awesome job. And then they mark that position, and they, more positively be able to do that more often.
Certainly for myself, I get frustrated when, say, a call, exactly that situation occurs. When you get the confirmation early, so maybe 2 strokes after you called it, you go, yep, that's on it. And then the coxswain says, well done, too soon. I kind of feel that you need to delay that gratification. You say, right, now stay on it. We're going to stay on it for 10. Do it for 10 strokes, and then say, well done. Because otherwise, I think a lot of people turn off if you give them praise too early. But maybe I'm just being really harsh.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the experience of the crew. If it's an elite crew, it might be a quick call of, great change, hold it. Then it's good, and I'm just going to sit here. So, other crews, you just keep reiterating. Perhaps if it's a novice crew, you might keep reiterating what you're after and go, that's a good 10 strokes there. Let's keep doing it that way. So I think,
Do you think 10 strokes is about the right amount of time to allow people to make and hold a change?
Depends on the experience of the crew. If I'm in elite crew, I expect a change of 1 or 2 strokes. They're experienced enough, depending on what the change is. In a race, if you took 10 strokes in a race to make that change, that's too late. It's too late. If you're in a training session and you have a novice crew, it's going to take them longer to get that change. And if you're in an 8, it's unlikely that all 8 people are going to nail that change together. And so depending on what that change is, it depends on the experience of the crew. Same as coxing, school crews, novice crews, you might count them in to where that change needs to be made. With an elite crew, for me, it'll be done in 1 stroke. This is what I'm after, and I'm after it now.
So the crew needs to have the facility to make changes and to be subtle with their oar.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And if I'm coxing someone for the first time, I might count them in, maybe in 2 strokes, because they might not be used to a coxing that wants the change in 1 stroke. The more senior elite crews, they will want to make that change in 1 stroke. So coxing is really about growth and adaptability for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about how to coach a cox. I'm expecting that some of the people listening here are coaches, but have never themselves been a cox. So, you're very fortunate in that you've both coached, obviously in road and coxed. So imagine I'm a coach who's never coxed. How should I look to coach coxswains?
You're correct. A lot of coxes don't get enough coaching these days on the water, and they're often coached by coaches that have never coxed themselves. So how do we deal with that? It's all about including the coxswain in your coaching on the water. So if you're coaching the crew on the water and you're giving them feedback, then give the cox feedback as well. Obviously, when you're coaching, you might be expecting to see a change. And if you think carefully whether the coxswain can see that change or not, you would be a positive feedback to the coxswain. Did you see this? What did that feel like? You can also, it's all about feel for the coxswain, and the coach might not know what it feels like. However, if they've been a rower, they would know what the change for themselves feel like and will be able to describe that to the coxswain. So it's really about including the coxswain in your feedback. And I think in real time.
Could you say something to the cox like, give me a thumbs up when you can feel the change, or, wave or...
Yeah, so if I'm coaching a coxswain, I'll always, good communication, so a thumbs up or a wave is always polite, so that they've understood what you've heard or heard what you've said. But I would make a call perhaps from the coaching tinny of what I'm after in my crew, and then I'll say to the coxswain, did you feel that change? And they'll go, yes. And I'll say, over to you. Try that call a few times in the next few minutes when you feel that change, drops off. So really including the cox in what you're doing. If you haven't coxed before, you probably don't know how to steer a boat with the string. So, certainly in schools, they kind of take the small kids and put them in the boat to cox, off a year and get into cox. And I often hear coaches on the water kind of telling them off a little bit to steer straight. Well, have you got in the boat and steered that yourself? Have you shown them how to pull the strings and how the boat responds? So really spending time with them and making sure they're engaged in the session, I think, is really important when we're coaching coxes.
One of the things that I, as a rower, get frustrated with is, say you've easied and you're about to row off again, the coxswain, instead of correcting and making the boat straight before you row off and then they go straight into a steering correction. What are the words you use when you're coaching to teach them to get the boat straight first, and how to find where straight is when you can't see past the big athlete in your stroke seat?
Oh, well, I would start, I guess, as a coxswain, I can help them out a little bit more. So I kind of go through these checkpoints for the coxswains themselves. So if I've been sitting chatting to them for a few minutes and the boat has drifted off course, the first thing I'd say to the coxswain is like, let's get the boat on course. And so if they kind of looking at me a little bit strange, I might give them a bit more feedback. Let's use our rowers. So the first thing, because I think coxswains think they have to pull the strings to steer all the time. But actually, it's the opposite. You've got 8 rowers in front of you, and I feel like that's my toolbox. And if you use your tools correctly, they should be able to correct that slight steering changes before you need to put the rudder on. So I'd say to them, let's straighten up. And I might prompt them a bit. If they're novice coxes, prompt them. We're going to straighten up, and to do that, we're going to use our bow pair, and then I might make the call myself, and then I'll say to the coxswain, "Can you see how straight you are?" And then I'd point to a landmark on the water, and that's what you want. If we're sitting here, that's what we want to be lining up towards. And so next time we stop there, let's try and line up with that, and that's kind of how I get them on. And then when we take off, I said, the rowers might not pull the same strengths for the first 3 or 4 strokes. Don't touch the rudder strings. Let the boat come up and moving first. And then we have those slight adjustments. But I would teach them about steering on the strings before we get on the water. I'd, put my hands in the boat and show them, the effects of how much give you would give on the strings. Because we certainly see, and we still do see a lot of coxes out there just straight to the right, all to the left, and not really learning about how that affects the boat. So it's all about education and spending time with them. And to keep your coxes, you want to keep them engaged, not staring, but certainly rowing technique, your erg sessions, get your coxes involved, explain it to them as you would a rower, because, ultimately then they can start taking charge of their crew.
I've heard Americans describe the directional choices as being, are you on point? Point being the place you are steering towards, that landmark. And that was a really helpful thing to understand, because it then becomes part of your check before you row off. You go, number off when you're ready, or sit at the finish when you're ready, or whatever. Come forward, are you ready, row? But before you do that, your job is to check the point and make sure you are pointing at that tree, or, as you say, the building.
Yeah, and just giving them checks on things. I think many people put their crews on the water. The rowers might know what they're doing in their session, but the coxswain might not know what they're doing in that session. So giving them a heads up of what is your session going to include? What direction are we going in? Now, if it's a novice coxswain, they're not going to remember all those things. So it's up to you as a coach to remind them as you go along. Okay, now we're going to go from the yellow sign to the white poles. Now we're going to do 2 trips of the course. Make sure you're straight the best you can down the course. And if it's windy, you can tell them the wind's going to come from your left side. So if you point the bow slightly into the wind, then you won't need to use the rudder strings down. Let's have a go at that. And I think it's really important to have a few rowing sessions where it's just for the coxswain. I mean, we have sessions where we want the rowers to do specific things, and for the rowers, to get the coxswain involved, right? Well, this is for the coxswain. We're going to show them where to steer. We're going to show them where the best line is, and we're going to have a go at that.
One of the things that I've heard it said for an aspiring coxswain like yourself who's trying to develop, I heard someone say, I made it my job to always know what was going on. So the crew could ask me, what's happening this session? What time is the next outing? When are we meeting to go away for the regatta? When's boat loading? And I thought that was actually quite interesting, because then you are at the heart of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly my training in the UK, that was part of my job. Always have a watch on. What time are we meeting? What time are we hands-on? What time are we boating? What is the plan for the course? Who's doing what? And also letting your rowers know. So, it'd be then my job to tell my rowers what time they need to go to the bathroom. And usually you make that earlier than you think, because,
They always
have to... always take so long, and they have to go 2 or 3 times. So, it's your job to make sure you know what's going on and where you need to be. And that takes the stress off the rowers, and also puts trust in the coxswain. I mean, that's part of my job, to get the boat out, make sure we're in the right place at the right time, even to make sure everything is done up tight on the boat, because sometimes coaches have many crews to deal with. And so as a coxswain, this is your crew, and, I feel like I'm the driver of the boat, and this is my toolkit, and all my tools in place. Is everything done up tight and in the right place? And then, the rower's job is to row the race and to respond.
Now, how would you select a coxswain? Sometimes you're in the blessed situation having more than one person who could, cox a crew, or maybe you've got 2 or 3 eights and you've got 2 or 3 coxswains. How would you go about finding the best cox when you're a coach, you're not in the boat with them?
Yeah, I think it depends on, again, the level of where we're selecting coxes. Are we talking school crews? Are we talking clubs? Are we talking more elite levels? And as I'm sure everyone is aware, coxing can be really subjective compared to rowers. Rowers, you sit on your 2K erg, you can seat race. It's very easy to say who's in front and where the numbers lie. For coxes, it's a little bit different, and it can be quite subjective. But we do need to make sure that it's quite transparent on, they need to know how they're going to be selected. must be encouraging at all times when you're selecting coxswains. Certainly in schools with young athletes, they can get disappointed, and kids get tested all the time at school. So disappointment and tears is bound to happen. So making sure you're encouraging. So the main thing for a coxswain is to steer straight. You need a coxswain that's going to steer straight. At the young levels, you want them to steer well. At the higher levels, we'll have GPS on the boat to check out our steering down a straight course, because you shouldn't need to steer down a straight course if you've got everything correct on the day. The calls that are being made, and then that's again could be subjective, because it depends on the crew that you're with and what works for them. Some people can be motivated different to others, and trying to have a whole 8 people, for example, like the same call is pretty unusual. So calling, implementing the plan, and being able to read races is pretty important as well. And then I think something that can be overlooked sometimes is the crew dynamics. So a coxswain can make quite a difference to a crew depending on their relationships. And, at the end of the day, the coxswain is going to be the one with you down that race, not the coach or the selectors. So really making sure you get input from your rowers. Now that can go 2 ways, obviously. It can become a popularity contest, and that's for the selectors and coaches, to know, that's kind of in place. But say you have 2 coxswains who the GPS steering is pretty good, the calls are really good, the crews are moving the same, the time difference is really not different, then I think it really does come down to the crew and what do they prefer to go down the course. And I think we don't ignore that at school level as well. We want all our coxes to be in a boat, and sometimes at the younger levels it might not be your best coxswain ever to go in a particular crew if they don't feel comfortable in there. You might have a female school coxswain who wants to coach cox girls, and so we go with that preference because ultimately we want to keep them in the sport. So at that younger level, we want to keep everyone coxing and as happy as possible. And I think at a school level, when I was coaching some school levels, I like to rotate the coxes through different crews so that they're exposed to everyone and they get an opportunity to win a few races and lose a few races and really just keep them in the sport, and then making sure that the rowers themselves can respect the job of a coxswain. So selecting a coxswain, it can be subjective, and I think it's important as a coxswain, if you're not selected for a particular crew, get some feedback on what that might be like, but also think, sometimes it might not be that you're not the best cox, it just might be at the time, it just might not be the right fit at the time. It just keep working hard and getting feedback and exposure.
Fantastic. Now I want to move on to you, because you are in the Paralympic squad for Australia, hopefully going to Tokyo 2021. What was your pathway into that end of the sport? Because am I right, you've never coxed para athletes before or even worked with them?
Yeah, I have worked with some in the UK. So when I was living in London, there was a few come and try days for para rowing, and I got myself involved. I think sometimes it's nice when you've been at the elite end of the sport. It's a little bit easy to do some things. It's about programming and planning, and to be able to give back to the sport, those that are involved for enjoyment and social enjoyment or just fitness. I think it's really nice to go back and be able to use a different coaching style. So I did do a bit of come and try para rowing in the UK before I moved to Australia. And I think back in 2016, the back end of the last Olympic cycle, I was invited along to trials for the Australian Women's 8. I hadn't known many of the rowers for very long. Also, there was the para rowers there as well, needing a coxswain. And so I did a few camps leading into trials with the para rowers to get involved in that squad and get exposed to that side of rowing. And then I went to trials and trialed, for the first time. I hadn't been part of the squad leading in, so it was unlikely I would be selected just based on how good I could cox, in that year. But getting my first exposure to the team was really important. And then moving up through there, post Rio, I got selected to my first Australian team 3 years ago with a new bunch of para rowers that have kind of their journey. I think we had a train for Tokyo kind of promotion back in this cycle. So to get involved with them. And so I got selected for my first time, and I've been lucky enough to be, continue that journey with them into 2020. So also got selected this year for the Paralympics. Unfortunately, that's very exciting, but unfortunately hasn't happened. And here in Australia, as I'm sure many rowing teams, is the team gets dissolved, if you like, and we have to trial again early next year. So that's how I got involved in the Paralympic team on the coxing side, and as you know, also involved on the coaching side.
How does your role split across those two things?
Well, our para rowing in Australia is not a centralised system. It's a camp-based system. And so I'm able to do my full-time job as a professor at the university, also coaching at the High Performance Academy in my state, and also being able to go on camps for the para rowing team. And so splitting my time, I keep busy. I like to keep busy. I fill all my hours. But basically we have Kathryn Ross, our PR2 women's scholar in Australia, who took a year off post Rio. She's been to all the Paralympics that she can compete in, multi-world champion, and she was looking to come back into the sport, and she came looking for me. So I met her just before Rio, actually, and had some experience with her, and she noticed how I was coaching and coxing the team, and she really liked the style that I was using, and so she sought me out, actually. She thought if she was going to come back to the sport that I was the person for her. So we felt that relationship out, several years ago, and really got from strength to strength. She lives in Canberra, the same as I do, and she was able to compete in her single at last year's World Championships, which is kind of a new event for the PR2s. The Paralympic event is the mixed double for the PR2s, and we didn't have a male in the sport post 2016. So she's training her single, and I think she's really come to the peak of her career, where last year, she won the World Championships with the gold medal in a world's best time. So really, and by quite a distance. So to be a part of that and coach an athlete, to that extent, as well as be involved at the coxing seat. So at training camps or world champs, it's very much about managing my time. And when I'm not at the university as well, when you're overseas, I find it fairly easy just to row all day, coach all day. So I'll just go from one crew to the other. And we just, with Kathryn and myself, it's just the two of us, so able to slot us in between my 4 responsibilities. For me, I found it quite easy, and I'm pretty focused and able to focus my job in each sense. And obviously, they race on different days at Worlds, so we're able to manage that. So from a coaching career point of view, that was pretty exciting for me. To then win Para Coach of the Year for Rowing Australia last year for those efforts, was amazing. And I think the first female coach to win that Coach of the Year award. And then to be nominated for, the Australian Sports Institute coaches to be nominated across that way. So definitely one for women coaches in elite sport, which we definitely need more of. And that win also has put me on a high performance talent workshop course with the Australian Institute of Sport, where now throughout this year I've been lucky enough to be involved with another 16 female elite coaches in Australia across different sports and pretty high profile names to be on a leadership course and really try and break down those barriers of female coaches in elite sport.
Yeah, there are a lot of them, and I can't help but think that a certain element of it is that there are people who think that women should only coach other women. And that women shouldn't coach men. And certainly in rowing, there is a amazing German woman coach called, I'll think of her name in a minute. She coached all of the women's crews through the 90s, 2000s. And she was like the only top woman at the World Championships. Like most of the other coaches of male or female crews were all men. So. Yeah,
it's interesting. That's interesting. I kind of, when I was coaching in Cambridge, and even yay Kat.
Betsy Owen Mitchell says yay Kat. She obviously knows Kat.
Yeah, he knows Kat. I coached a lot of the men's crews for colleges in Cambridge, and I mean I coxed a lot of men's crews as well. And so for me, it's not about whether they're male or female. They're an athlete to me, and how do you get the most potential out of them? But I have coached a lot of men's crews, and even coming to Australia in the High Performance Academy, I had men's crews, and quite often you'd be at nationals, following your men, youth boys down the course, and there'd be a lot of men on the cycle path, not too many female coaches coaching men. So there's the barriers that we want to break. Certainly one of our current Australian rowers, Caleb Antle, is a male on the men's national training centre on the men's team. I coached him up into the men's training centre out of school. So I think if you can have a good relationship with an athlete, it shouldn't matter whether you're male or female.
Jutta Lau was the name of the German woman. Yeah. Now, Renae, you also teach other coxswains, and you have a whole load of workshops that you can run, which can be virtual. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about what you have on offer that they might be interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. So here in Australia, and I have a few international coxes, I have a little mentor group through a Facebook group that I can invite people, coxswains, to, and it's a free, safe space to be able to talk about coxing and issues or comments and positivity, really to keep these coxes in the sport. In addition to that, I do run coxing workshops. Certainly in the time of COVID shutdown recently, it was a really great time to provide education. So being able to get school groups online and run workshops virtually on how to be a better coxswain, or what's the coxswain's role and what can I do, and also how exciting it is. Also for clubs, perhaps intermediate coxes, how can I be a better coxswain, or I want to go to the elite level. And then also for coaches, how do I coach a coxswain? You know, where do I start? Here's what I do. What are the issues you kind of come across? How do I go about that? And then really just encouragement of support. You know, I often get people going, great workshop. You know, can we come out with you in a session, or can you come out with us? So I'm available to provide that, to be booked out for some of those virtual sessions. So I can provide my email if that's what you'd be after, Rebecca. So my email would be rendomas@gmail.com. So rendomas@gmail.com. So you can contact me, let me know what you're after. They could be small groups or bigger groups. And I just want to keep coxes in the sport and give back from what I've learnt and make people better.
And if people want to join your private Facebook group, the same email?
Yes, drop me an email if you're a coxswain. Tell me a little bit about yourself in coxing, and then we'll be able to hook you up.
Fantastic. So if you know a coxswain who might appreciate Renae's insight, advice, and deep experience, I will put the link to her email in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and you're driving or something, don't worry, don't crash. You'll be able to find all of the details of how to get in touch with Renae. Or you can, in all likelihood, find her, because I bet you're the only Renae Domaschenz in the whole world.
Yes, absolutely. So if you Google me, I'll come up all kind of things rowing, and you'll find all my details there, and perhaps some of my workshops even. So yeah, more than willing to help. I really enjoyed the sport myself. I haven't finished myself in the sport. I certainly feel like I have a lot to offer, and always willing to provide help and advice to people if I can.
Renae, your insights into coxing have been really illuminating, and it's so good that you are so generous with your advice and insights, and I, for one, really appreciate that. And of course, I've hugely enjoyed being coxed by you. What a privilege. What a lot of fun we've had.
Yeah, so much fun. I do remember a race, Rebecca. We were in Oxford. Remember this Masters race we had in Oxford? Super fun race. And Rebecca decided we weren't going to quite wait for that go from the starter. Do you remember that? And remember, you were stroking and you were like, Renae, we're going to go just before. And we jumped the start, and Rebecca and I thought it was okay, you know, and the rest of the crew didn't really know what was happening, but it was quite fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, we when there was a protest from the opponents, the umpire said, well, it was perfectly clear to me that only Stern pair jumped the start, that nobody else did anything.
Yeah, it was quite adventurous. I also remember a race in Italy with the Cambridge Masters men that we had this arrangement with this Italian club that would go over to Italy every couple of years, or they would come to us. And I remember I don't remember who it was, but it's very well known alumni, Cambridge rower in the stroke, and we're in Italy, and they were speaking Italian, so we didn't really know what was going on. But we're at the start line, but the Italians kept creeping up past the start line, and so then, you know, the stroke man and my crew were like, keep moving up. And I think we ended up starting a good 400 meters into the race, and not quite sure when the race even started, because people just started rowing, and you know, those things are quite exciting as well. So many adventures, such a great opportunity.
It's been an absolute delight having you on Rowing Chat, Renae. Thank you so much. And to the listeners, please sign up to our newsletter. You'll find it on rowing.chat. You can subscribe, and we send you just a weekly email that has links to each of the episodes that's published in any of the podcasts that are in the Rowing Chat network. So that's once a week. Or, of course, please rate and review us on any of the podcast apps that you have already in use. We really appreciate you being with us. Thank you to all our lovely live listeners and watchers, and for the questions that came in. We had one last remark from Betsy, who says that Kat gave her lots of tips and she met her in egg billet, or egg billet, as we used to call it. It's a little bit rude. So till next time on Rowing Chat, I've been Rebecca Caro. Bye-bye.